I was at the foot of the cross and I could see Jesus's feet and I could smell the dirt, like, dirt floating in the air.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Episode 151. What was meant to harm me, God used for good. This is basically taking Genesis 50:20. That's what that verse says. What was meant to harm me, God used for good. And we find that in this episode. This would appear to be a case where a very cunning Satan was kind of playing Shauna, and it backfired on him. Instead of getting half-truths, she got the whole truth. It's fascinating how this all kind of plays out. So it dazzles me how God comes and gets us. We've often talked about how God will meet you wherever you are. Actually, that's not the way Jesus put it. He put it, I'll meet you where you're at. Yeah, he was such a rebel. He was always ending sentences on prepositions. I tell you, what a rebel. So how did he get you? If you go back a couple of episodes, remember the Paint by Numbers episode? Edward and Anna in the UK, agnostic, atheist, didn't care a bit. And how did God go get them? With numbers. Kept throwing the same numbers at them again and again. It couldn't be random. It couldn't be random. And that's how they knew there was a God, and that's how God reeled them in. Well, with Shauna in this episode, she grew up Catholic, had no desire to go back to her Catholic faith, had no desire. But that's how God went and got her and reeled her back in. As I've said many times here at Touched by Heaven, whether you are Catholic or Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, pick a faith, all of them important. All of them do wonderful, wonderful work. But what does God want with you within that structure? He wants a relationship, right? He doesn't want just ritual. He doesn't want just you show up for an hour on Sunday or something. He wants a relationship, an every day, every moment, every breath relationship with you. That is key to all of this. This is how he came after Shauna. It's a very Catholic episode, and if you're Catholic, you may find this interesting. If you're not, you may find this interesting, what you find out along the way. But it's about the relationship, and he was coming after Shauna.
Hi, Trapper.
Is it Shana or Shana? I'm sorry.
It's Shauna.
Shauna.
I know.
How'd you get a Shauna out of a Shana? Sheena.
My parents didn't know how to spell it. My dad had heard Anna pronounced like Anna. And so he thought, oh, you just add a SH to the beginning. And the nurse told my mom she couldn't spell it that way. And my mom got obstinate and decided, yes, she could.
Wow, that says something for mom. So there you go.
Anyway, yeah.
So where do you want to start?
I grew up Catholic, but I would never really say that I was Catholic. I mean, even though I grew up Catholic, I never understood what that meant. I didn't, poorly catechized, right? Like
pretty much all of us, especially a certain era. I think they're getting better now, but it's...
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
It's when so I was born in 1966. So, growing up in the 70s and 80s when I guess the church was trying to be kinder and gentler and more kumbaya. But I was in that camp of people that fell into relativism, that thinking of like, there's lots of paths, there's lots of right ways to get there, and it's about being a good person. But I was open to that if there was a right way, and I would pray that a lot. If there's a truth, if there's one right way, please show me. But in the meantime, I'm running my own business and reading a lot of the business books. I would call them new age books that are dressed up like business books, really. Think and Grow Rich, or, that Law of Attraction and The Secret and all that kind of stuff. I didn't believe in the authority of the church at that time, right? So even if you had told me that's against what's in the Bible, it might have piqued my curiosity to find out why, but it wouldn't have been the end-all authority for me. But I was on a path. I was trying to figure it out. And I ended up going to a spa. Well, it was like a 10-day cleanse. And I thought I was just going for health reasons. It's like you eat super healthy foods, almost juicing kind of stuff. You go into an infrared, well, it wasn't a sauna. It was more like an infrared mat. and that's supposed to be like a cellular cleanse. And then they put you on this vibrating machine. So I would go there every morning for 10 days. They would do this whole rigmarole of stuff. And I was thinking I was just going to be super healthy. And it turns out it was kind of new agey too, which I wasn't completely offended by because I didn't understand really what that was. It was just another path in my perspective. One of the things they had me do at the very beginning is set an intention. They said, okay, you have to set kind of a spiritual intention. And so I had set my intention that I wanted to know if there was truth, if there was a path. And I think at that time, one of my colleagues was like, heck no, I'm not doing that. That is strictly forbidden in the Bible. And I was like, it is? And, thank heavens she was brave enough to say that, because I had no idea. And it got me thinking. I'm still not convinced, but I'm at least exploring. So then I go to this cleanse, and this lady comes in while you're on this infrared cleansing mat thing. And she has she's like a medium, or she does this energy work kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever gone down that path with like a psychic or anything. But
once upon a time when I too was kind of fumbling around
I think and this lady was apparently Catholic, as you just sit and chit chat, and then she just started saying stuff that was just so dead on, some stuff that gave it real validity. And at one point during that, remember this was a 10-day thing. And I don't remember if it wasn't the first day, but maybe it was the third, fourth, or fifth day. She said that that the Virgin Mary was with us, and the Archangel Michael was with us, and that they were there as spiritual protection, and that they were also going to protect my son through his life. And then she said, oh, wait, they're asking me to step back. Are you okay? To step away from you. Are you okay with that? And I said, yes. And it didn't feel like a vision. It felt like I was being pulled, like I was pulled out of my body. It felt like an out-of-body experience. And I was at the foot of the cross, or what I perceived to be the foot of the cross, right? And I could see Jesus's feet, and I could smell the dirt, like, dirt floating in the air. And I wasn't there for long before I kind of got whisked back into my body, if you will. And I took that as an answer to, if there's a truth, show me what it is. It was probably, I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't any more than 5 minutes, let's say.
That's a long time. So you were at the foot of the cross for 5 minutes?
Well, I wouldn't even know if it was 5 minutes. I don't remember, because it was 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Do
you remember looking up, or just the feet, the dirt?
I couldn't look up.
You couldn't?
I couldn't look up.
Oh.
It's like I couldn't bear to look up.
Mm.
Like I don't know if it was a feeling of worthiness or what. But now here's the weird part. And this is why I say it's maybe kind of a very uniquely Catholic story. I took that as a like I was getting pointed in the right, as to an answer to my prayer, right? The Christianity is the path. And so I started exploring. But that didn't tell me that Catholic was right. It just told me Christianity to me, that was like a breadcrumb saying this is the path. And so then I started doing a lot of the research of, okay, so if you're Christian, why Catholic? What? And I started reading or listening. Probably listening is a better way than reading. I've read a lot, but I listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff. And so listen to a lot of conversion stories, and listen to a lot of people who talk about the early church fathers. And my friend from work, the one who told me you can't go to a psychic, she was also not baptized. And I was like, well, I was trying to figure out like who's right about this stuff. If we're all disagreeing, about like what the Bible says. I was trying to figure that out. Which
she was not baptized?
she wasn't baptized, but she was a strong Christian, but she felt like the Bible said that you didn't have to be baptized. So Catholics interpret the Bible this way. Her pastor interprets it this way. And that led me down the path of, authority and early church fathers, and realizing that Catholicism it has pretty much been the same since Jesus's time. I didn't even know, Trapper, I didn't even know that the Pope had a direct line of succession all the way back to Peter, and that we have it all recorded.
Yep.
I didn't know any of that. That's how naive I was about my own faith that I grew up in.
But you're not alone. I mean, that's why there is that apostolic Catholic and Greek Orthodox. Yeah, every priest, you can trace it all the way back to the apostles. Yeah.
I started reading or listening to stories of saints, and then I stumbled on the Eucharistic miracles, which then strongly validated or taught me about. Then I learned about the real presence, and then the Eucharistic miracles, and that kind of stuff goes a million miles with me, because the amount of, what the Catholic Church puts into researching and trying to prove these things wrong is just amazing.
They hire the best atheist scientists to prove.
Yes, they do.
To prove that bread didn't just become heart muscle. Yeah.
Right.
And just so you know, Touched by Heaven, I don't claim it to be a Catholic podcast. I'm Catholic. But, I think of this as kind of a giant funnel, if you will.
Right.
And
right.
I have no trouble talking about Eucharistic miracles or Mary things, because to me, this is just all part of the big truth. And once you realize why we're talking about what we're talking about right now, it's just one of the big truths. It doesn't mean that you're in the wrong place for who you are right now. He'll meet you wherever you are, and he wants the relationship more than he wants you Catholic. With all due respect. He wants the relationship more than he wants you Catholic, because if you're Catholic but have no relationship, what's the point?
No, exactly right. You can be Catholic by name, but not Catholic at all.
Absolutely. So when you stumbled upon what I claim is one of the greatest selling points, which is, look at the science in this, or Our Lady of Guadalupe, look at the science in this thing.
I know. It's
when
the
you
miracles.
stumbled upon that, didn't you say to yourself, why don't I know this?
I did.
When I give talks in churches, the biggest thing people say to me is, "Why don't I know this? Why don't we?" What?
Right.
Yeah. Why are we waxing poetic about the real presence in a 20-minute homily, when all you have to do is come out and tell a story of how blood started oozing down on a priest's hands from the Eucharist, and it's like documented.
What happened was that I just kept getting led by. It was just like breadcrumbs. It's like I would watch one thing, and then that would open up something else that I didn't know about. And then I would pursue that, and that would open up something else I didn't know about. And here's kind of the second part of the story. The second weird part is that I then stumbled upon one of the not podcasts, probably the recorded homilies that make it to YouTube, by a priest named Father Ripperger. Are you familiar with Father Ripperger at all?
He's interesting, isn't he?
Yeah. So I listened to some of his, as an exorcist, right? I started listening to his stories of exorcisms, his stories of battling the devil, and his stories of, the devil can show up as an angel of light. If you go back to my original experience at the spa that kind of put me on this track, or I felt like I had some guidance that Christianity was the way to go. But I also didn't get a sense that what I was doing was wrong there. I kind of had this sense of, I got this great blessing from a psychic, and the Bible says that I shouldn't be talking to channelers or psychics, right? So there was still some confusion there for me. I hadn't quite reconciled those two things yet. And then I listened to some stories of the saints. And there's two of them. One of them I've been desperately trying to find again. One's easy to re-find. The other one I have just been looking for. The first one was a story of Saint Martin de Tours. There's a Saint Martin de Tours and one of de Tours. And but one of the stories I heard was that the devil appeared to Saint Martin as if he were Christ, but he immediately knows to say, "Get out of here, Satan." And the reason he knew is because none of the marks of the crucifixion were present.
Well, and you wonder, okay, why was he not allowed to have the wounds of Christ on his body? It's like, if you're going to come in as Christ, wouldn't you have that there too? Because he's still carrying the wounds. He still has his wounds,
Right. Yeah, glorify Christ.
Until it's all over, he still has the wounds. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I realized that my experience, Christ didn't have his wounds on his feet. They were dirty. They were tortured. But there was no blood and there was no wounds.
You saw no nails.
I saw no nails. So while I was absolutely convinced that that is where I got transported to, I later, through this journey, now believe, and this is where it's like, I don't even know if this story makes sense to transmit, but I later really, truly, truly believe that it was probably a demonic experience rather than a holy experience.
But didn't it draw you closer to Christ or not?
It did. Yeah, it did. It doesn't mean that the devil's plans always work. For sure it did. For sure it did. But I don't believe...
maybe to draw you in closer to the psychic, maybe?
Yeah. Well, remember, it planted confusion for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I still didn't... because here I am being told or thinking that I'm guided towards Christ, but also here's this really, really great psychic who's doing this very positive, loving work, bringing the Virgin Mary to me, bringing the Archangel Michael to me, opening some portal that put me at the foot of the cross, like how do you not walk away from that having a very positive impression of that experience?
That is fascinating.
Yeah,
that is interesting. And you couldn't look up for whatever reason. You couldn't look up. What is it? Well, and no wounds on the feet. That's interesting. But
then the other saint story that you've probably heard this one. So Padre Pio, of course, was had many stories of being tormented by the devil. The devil would show up as a naked woman trying to tempt him. The devil would show up and beat him up, and the devil would show up sometimes as the Blessed Virgin. And Padre Pio did the same thing. He said he knew when to say, "Get out of here, Satan," because when the devil showed up as the Virgin Mary, her feet would always be covered. And so there's something there. There's always a clue. Like he can't apparently. And so then tying it back to Father Ripperger and some of his teachings, and, like the devil can mimic and try to mislead us, but he can't completely. There's something wrong. Like if you had like some of the people that receive apparitions from the Virgin Mary, and then they start talking about aliens and
that's a good clue. That's a good clue.
And it's not even necessarily that aliens aren't real. They could be, but when it's so weird and out there that it's so far from Catholic teaching.
Well, look what happened to Saint Faustina Kowalska. Here she's, Christ is appearing to her. She's writing this book. She's writing down everything he says, and then the devil showed up apparently as Christ. And from that, throw that book in the fire, and she did. She threw it away, and they had to start all over again. Jesus allowed this. This is what is amazing to me. Jesus comes back, the real guy, and they go through this again. What is that about?
Well, I think that if we're really made in the likeness and image of God, and I think there's something about us that we like to figure this out. We like the mystery. We like this. We're the only, there's no other creature that just likes to figure things out. So I think that there's something about the journey that's incredibly powerful.
Let's pause right about here with Shauna. More of what was meant to harm me, God used for good, coming up. Time for my Patreon shout-out, which this week goes to Dorothy. Thank you so much, Dorothy. Panicity, or is it Panicity? Either way, it's beautiful, and thank you for your beautiful support for keeping this all going, Dorothy. We appreciate it. We'll see you on the next Zoom call, by the way. We have one coming up here. It's really cool what happens on these monthly Zoom calls. We had, and this kind of ties to this episode, too. But Elizabeth, not a Catholic, she was on the Zoom call talking about how she's praying the rosary now because of this podcast and finding comfort in it. I hear this so often from people who didn't grow up with much information about Mary or So we embrace Mary. We hope everyone embraces the mother of Jesus. Nobody loves Mary more than Jesus. So, don't worry about giving too much devotion to Mary. You're going to be outdone by Jesus every time. That's the goal of Mary, bringing people to Jesus. And that's what she does. So let's go back to Jesus, okay? And this story. But if you want to help us out, patreon.com, just search for Trapper Jack. Or right here at episode 151, there's a link into Patreon. And thank you so much for your support and keeping this moving along, all right? Now more with Shauna, and what was meant to harm me, God used for good, here on Touched by Heaven. I know early on when I started doing this podcast, there was one episode in which I think I called it The Other Voice. In one case, it was a woman who was beginning to hear voices, and she thought it was an angel, and I took her through the process, and it was early enough and fresh enough.
Oh, I listened to that one.
Yeah.
I think I listened to that one. Yeah, and then she came back. You had a second interview with her?
Yeah, she was, and then she was fine. She was fine. The voices went away. Because I told her, I said, you're not praying the rosary like you used to. Nope. And you're not doing this anymore, are you? And anyway, she had this, and she felt embarrassed. And I felt bad that she felt embarrassed, but she was thrilled that she got turned right and all the other voices went away. But then on that same episode, there was a guy, and what was his name? Michael, maybe. I don't know. But he had been into this 18 years of chaos. But he didn't register it anymore. After it's just embedded in him, and they have him going off in so many directions, and it's just all a mess. And he's cool with it. And there's nothing I could say. There's nothing, you hope somewhere along the way somebody, that he kind of sees where he is. But he's in no man's land right now. Mm-hmm. But it can be confusing.
Well, and one of the things that Father Ripperger said is that the sacrament of confession is often more efficacious than the rite of exorcism. Like a good confession will, scare off the demons more than the rite of exorcism even.
As a guy who didn't go for 15 years and then went, it was life-changing.
Wasn't it? I know.
It clears out everything, and the blessing spigot gets turned back on again because Christ instituted reconciliation through the apostles. I mean, it's in there, whose sins you shall forgive, they are forgiven. And again, that apostolic tradition down to the present. They just kept passing it on. And something happens in there. So the fact that very, very few Catholics go to confession anymore because they think, I don't want to tell some guy my sins, is a huge victory for the devil. Huge victory. Because it's not all cleaned out. This blessing spigot does not get turned on full bore. And that's a huge victory for the devil.
Well, and I think that, it's an uncomfortable thing to get humble and say, this is where I've fallen. It's so hard to do it, especially when you're first coming back. That big, long life confession. Oh my gosh, it's painful. And you don't get it done with one either, because then you keep thinking of things. So for the first few, it's just so painful. But you are right. There is something, like even my son, because I've been ever since for the last 5 years, we go monthly pretty much every month. And the first time that I took him after, I come back, he just walked out, and you just feel like you're walking on clouds. There's just no description for it. You just feel forgiven. You feel clean.
Mm-hmm. I was going to tell you, I know what it was. I was talking to a guy who, when he was a kid, he was pretty young. And they were walking through a church, and confessions are being held. He's walking along, and he looks over to where the confessional is. But anyway, the curtain was pulled back from where the priest was sitting. And he saw the priest with his kind of face in his hands, and he thought, wow, that's a lot of hair that priest has. And then he looked over, and it was Christ. And this was a kid looking into and that's the fact. It's not a priest in there. It's Christ in there.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose, is that Christ is in there. You're telling your sins to Christ, not to the man.
That reminds me of one of my confession moments that I totally forgot about this. But at my church, they have the Divine Mercy image on the wall. And during one of my confessions, it looked to me like that image was crying. And I perceive happy tears of, like come and clean stuff. But that too was another one that was just like, Wow.
Nothing makes him happier.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Exactly.
I mean, look at the difference between Peter and Judas. One came back and said, I'm sorry, and one didn't. That's the difference. We're all sinners. We're all sinners. Right. That is the difference between heaven and hell. There's sinners go to both places. One said, I'm sorry, and one didn't.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal.
All right. What's next in your story? It's a great story, by the way. You got good stuff.
I think there's one other thing, and that was, as I was coming back, I very much felt like I feel like I always kind of lived a charmed life. And I was always, so my husband and I own a business. We've always been, fairly successful. I was always kind of that think and grow rich businesswoman and passing those principles on to my team, having book clubs and reading about it and talking about it and thinking about it, things that way. And really lived a very charmed life. And as I started to come back to the church, I very much feel like, and this is just maybe subjective, but I very much felt a demonic retaliation. For a period of time after my first confession, before I had kind of remembered absolutely everything, I had these intense dreams every single night. Not normal dreams, not normal weird dreams, just seriously intense, crazy dreams that I was just finally praying to please make them go away. Lots of weird stuff started happening. I don't know, just bad things. And I was, and at some point I was just kind of like, you can't, it's just too much to be coincidence. It just really felt like a demonic attack.
Did you pray for extra protection, or did that occur to you at the moment?
I don't think I knew about that option. And then it's later through probably just more Father Ripperger stuff, right? And then I purchased a book of his that was his deliverance prayers and protection prayers and the binding prayers. And some of those where, understanding that you can command a demon to, that they're very legalistic and you can command them to leave you alone and to leave your relationships alone. And
in the name of Jesus, Jesus has some strong action against the devil. Absolutely. And so does Mary. Yeah. She ticks him off more than Jesus does, because here's one of us who remained uncorrupted.
Yeah.
No sin.
Well, she holds a place of honor in heaven. And he doesn't.
He did once.
He did once, but he lost it. So he's like even more ticked off.
Well, think about it. If you're the devil, you had that spot. Yeah. Lucifer had that spot. He had it all. He throws it away, and then he sees us attaining it. He will do anything to keep us out of there.
Anything.
Because he remembers. He remembers the joy, the happiness. He remembers. And now what does he have? He's got some power, but he also knows he's going to be put away. He knows that his time is short.
Yeah. Can
you imagine the anger? Whoa. Man, if you had any idea how much he hates God and us.
Well, that was one of the lessons that Father Ripperger, he has a talk about guardian angels, and he talks about how they were infused with perfect knowledge when they made their decision. There was no ambiguity like, oh, I didn't know that, or I wouldn't have decided that. They were infused with perfect knowledge when they chose, right? So there's no going back, because they didn't make a mistake. They made a choice.
That's the difference between them and Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were still in it. They were innocents. They were veiled. They didn't have all the information, whereas all the angels did have all the information.
And one of the talks of Father Ripperger, too, thinking of what you just said, he said that in one of his exorcisms, the demon, and I don't know if it was Lucifer, but whatever demon he was working with, said that as much as he hates God, the biggest punishment is to not have the beatific vision, right? He said he would be drug across a rusty barbed wire fence for all of eternity if he could have 1 second gazing at God's beauty. and feeling God's love again. So
A
yeah, they're
demon said
ticked.
that?
A demon said that.
Wow.
He still didn't choose it, and he knew he didn't choose it, but he's also acknowledging what he's lost. And it just makes him more pissed off than ever.
Yeah.
Because, they almost felt like they were entitled to it. That's it. They're very proud.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Ripperger, and I'm trying to remember if I have seen much of him, but what's so interesting, what's so timely about our conversation is a friend of mine just told me, was it yesterday or today, he said, I just watched an hour and 20-minute video on YouTube of Ripperger. And it's like, and he started talking about it. I said, well, would you send that to me? And then all of a sudden you're on my phone and we're talking about Ripperger. So that's not a coincidence. So I will get whatever video it is he saw. I'll grab some of it so people can, just be a little familiar with what he has said, because apparently this guy is hitting home runs in his talks.
This guy I will tell you, this guy is bringing people back like crazy. He's super educated, right? He has 1 or 2 PhDs. So he's not, there's nothing about him that comes off as superstitious. It's all very, very educated. But the ones, I would watch anything that he's done on spiritual warfare. He has a million good things, but anything on spiritual warfare. And then the one on guardian angels, unbelievable. That's where he talks about angels and demons. And he's a very, it references Thomas Aquinas a lot.
And Ripperger is Rippiger?
2 P's, Ripperger.
See, and here's the deal, and you sound like you're in kind of the same boat I am. I am so tired of kumbaya. There's a war going on, and there's a limited time. We're about to come to the end of an age. I really believe that, based on everything going on in the world and what the awakening and all these saints, people with wounds in their bodies, are saying, it's just about done, guys. It's decision time. Yeah. It's all pointed to the same direction. Medjugorje is pointed that same direction.
Fatima, Akita, Pope Leo the 13th's vision. Mm-hmm. You've heard about that one where he fell backwards after Mass?
Yep.
Yeah,
that's where Saint Michael. The Saint Michael the Archangel prayer. Came from that moment. So, what was your turning point? What can you point to a point where you could just go all of a sudden? Oh, now I know I'm on the right path.
It was lots of them. I thought they were all turning points. I thought that when I was taken to the foot of the cross, that was my turning point. It was just like I said, I'm very intellectual about it. I think people come to faith from either a head place or a heart place. And for me, it's a head place. Not that it hasn't, my heart has followed, but my heart didn't lead me. My head led me, and then my heart followed. And I think that people have 2 different journeys and from that perspective, I think then it was a combination of proving to myself that the Catholic Church was the right path. So the Eucharistic miracles, the evidence of the exorcisms and demons, the church, the early church fathers, the apostolic succession, that combination of things that I just was like, I can't. It's not this is not the religion you would choose if you want to be hip or cool or blend in with the culture. It's like the opposite. I didn't want to find this. This is how I grew up. I wanted to be something that I would have much preferred to be Buddhist or, something else. And even the Catholic Church has so many black eyes, right? That there was part of me that was embarrassed, and I had to learn those lessons of, that we're just full of people. We're full of sinners. It doesn't invalidate the church, right? The teachings are the teachings. Teachings are beautiful. Teachings have been there for 2,000 years. There hasn't been that much that's changed, really. Not that much. And it's like what you said at the very beginning, it's like having a real, true, honest relationship. I think he would take that all day long over a lukewarm Catholic.
Thanks, Shauna. So interesting. I want to go back to that, at the foot of the cross thing again. Takes her to the foot of the cross, smells the dirt. It's in the air. She sees the feet of Jesus, can't look up, can't bear to look up, and all that kind of stuff. So you got some half-truths in that, because all of that, it was there, except no nails, no wounds, no blood, no sacrifice, No sacrifice here. Nothing happened here. Go back to your homes. Nothing happened here. One giant half-truth. And who led Shauna to the truth? The saints. What do the saints do? The saints are like the moon. They reflect the light of the sun. That's what the saints did in this case, showing her by these breadcrumbs that God so beautifully threw before her. These breadcrumbs, the saints guided her to, wait a minute, is this demonic? Oh, giant half-truth. That was incredible. Leading her to Father Ripperger, Ripperger. And interesting, too, in one of his talks, he talks about, isn't it interesting, again, going back to our title, what was meant to harm me, God used for me. Ripperger makes the point that the demons actually make you holier. Why? Because when you fight temptation, when you strive to be more Christ-like, when you strive to push away from him, from sin, and to become more like Christ, you're becoming holier. You're becoming holier. In effect, what was meant to harm you, God uses. It's interesting. So we'll put a link here on this in the show notes here to one of his talks. But otherwise, just look for him on YouTube. And he's done a lot of work out there. A lot of work. All right. So thank you so much again, Shauna. And now then, what is your story? You have a story you're sitting on. Angel story, divine intervention, near-death experience, prophetic dream. What is it for you? Let me know. Get a hold of me here at touchedbyheaven.net. And thank you again for your support through Patreon. We appreciate it so much. Patreon.com, search for Trapper Jack, or just come here to episode 151 and click your way through. Thank you again. Don't forget, if you want more of these Touched by Heaven stories in this Touched by Heaven universe, come here, episode 151, and click Stay Informed. We'll get you on the weekly email list and send you more stories. All right? All right. See you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.